A broke janitor mocked for his dead-end job just inherited a rusted submarine. What he found inside would change everything and silence every doubter forever. Before we dive into this unbelievable story, hit subscribe, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. The last laugh. The rain hammered against the grimy windows of the Portland Maritime Museum, each drop sounding like a disapproving click of the tongue. Ethan Cole wiped his brow with the back of his hand, his callous fingers gripping the mop handle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, casting a sickly glow over the faded exhibits. The skeletal remains of ship models, yellowed maps, and a rusted anchor that looked as tired as he felt. "Cole, you missed a spot," sneered Rick Dawson, the museum's head of security, kicking at a smudge near the display case. His polished shoes gleamed under the lights, a stark contrast to Ethan's scuffed work boots. Ethan didn't answer. He'd learned long ago that silence was the only shield against men like Rick. Men who got off on reminding him that at 42, he was nothing more than a janitor in a dead-end job. He pushed the mop across the floor, the rhythmic squeak of rubber against linoleum filling the empty hall. The night shift was the worst. Lonely, quiet, just him and the ghosts of sailors long gone, their stories trapped behind dusty glass. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from his landlord. Rent due Friday. No excuses this time. Ethan exhaled, his breath fogging the glass of a nearby exhibit. He had $27 in his bank account and a stack of overdue bills on his kitchen counter. The museum's clock ticked toward midnight when the front door creaked open. Ethan frowned. No one ever came in this late. A man in a tailored overcoat stepped inside, shaking rainwater from his sleeves. His sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on Ethan. "Ethan Cole?" Ethan tightened his grip on the mop. "Yeah." The man reached into his coat, and for a wild second, Ethan thought he might pull a gun. Instead, he produced a sealed envelope. "I'm Jonathan Price, attorney at law. You've been named the sole inheritor of your late uncle's estate." Ethan blinked. "My uncle?" The word tasted foreign. He hadn't spoken to his father's brother in over 20 years, not since the man had been disgraced in some naval scandal and vanished from their lives. Price's lips thinned. "Captain Henry Cole. He passed last month." He held out the envelope. "You've inherited his vessel, the Neptune's Shadow." Ethan let out a dry laugh. "A boat? That's it." "A submarine, actually," Price corrected, docked at the old Bremerton shipyard in Washington. You have 48 hours to claim it before it's seized for scrap. Ethan's pulse jumped. A submarine? His uncle had always been obsessed with the ocean, but this was insane. "Why me?" Price shrugged. "You're his only living relative. The paperwork is in order." He slid a business card onto the nearest display case. "Call if you have questions, but don't wait too long." And just like that, he was gone, leaving Ethan standing in the empty museum, the rain still pounding outside like the universe itself was laughing at him. The next morning, Ethan stood on the creaking dock of Bremerton's abandoned shipyard, the salt-heavy wind biting through his thin jacket. The place was a graveyard of forgotten ships, rotting hulls, rusted chains, and seagulls screaming overhead. And there it was, the Neptune's Shadow. The submarine loomed like a sleeping beast, its steel side streaked with rust and seaweed. It was smaller than Ethan had imagined, maybe 150 feet long, but no less intimidating. The conning tower tilted slightly, as if the sub had tried to escape the dock years ago and given up. "You the new owner?" Ethan turned to see a grizzled dockworker eyeing him from a nearby shed. The man's name tag read O'Brien. "Yeah," Ethan said, though the word felt absurd. O'Brien spat into the water. "That hunk of junk's been here since '92. Your uncle was the last one to sail her. Came back alone, half out of his mind. Said he'd found something out there." He narrowed his eyes. 2 weeks later, he was dead. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "How?" "Officially, heart attack." O'Brien lit a cigarette. "Unofficially, some folks say he was silenced." Ethan stared at the sub. What the hell had his uncle been involved in? Steeling himself, he climbed the makeshift gangplank, the metal groaning under his weight. The hatch was stiff, but after a few hard tugs, it gave way with a hiss of stale air. Darkness swallowed him as he descended the ladder. The smell of oil and mildew filled his lungs. His flashlight flickered over corroded pipes, peeling paint, and something glinted near the captain's chair. Ethan crouched, brushing away layers of dust. A small metal box, its lock rusted but intact. His fingers trembled as he pried it open. Inside lay a single key and a faded photograph of his uncle standing beside a map covered in red X's. Scrawled on the back were 4 words. "They killed me. Run." Rust and secrets. The flashlight trembled in Ethan's grip as the submarine's stale air clung to his skin. The beam flickered over corroded walls, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to shift whenever he blinked. He swallowed hard, the taste of salt and rust thick on his tongue. "They killed me. Run." The words from the photograph burned in his mind. His uncle dead, not from a heart attack, if O'Brien was to be believed, murdered. And whatever he had found, whatever had gotten him killed, was somehow tied to this rotting metal coffin. Ethan's fingers tightened around the key from the box. It was cold against his palm, heavier than it should have been. He turned it over, squinting in the dim light. No markings, just a simple brass key, the kind that might open a locker or a safe. A loud clang echoed from deeper in the sub. Ethan jerked upright, his breath hitching. The sound had come from the narrow corridor ahead, where the darkness swallowed his flashlight's beam hole. "Hello." His voice bounced off the metal walls, hollow and small. Silence. Probably just the old hull settling. Or a loose pipe. That's what he told himself. Anyway, steeling his nerves, he crept forward, his boots scraping against the grated floor. The submarine groaned around him, a living thing protesting his intrusion. The corridor led to a cramped control room, where dials and switches sat frozen under decades of dust. A tattered map was pinned to the wall, its edges brittle with age. Ethan leaned closer. Coordinates, dozens of them, scribbled in faded ink across the North Atlantic. One circled in red. 24 degrees 22 minutes north, 81 degrees 48 minutes west. The Florida Keys. His uncle's handwriting was unmistakable in the margin. "Neptune's price is paid in gold." A chill prickled the back of Ethan's neck. Another noise this time, a scrape, like metal on metal. He spun, heart hammering. Who's there? Nothing. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. Ethan's pulse roared in his ears. He wasn't alone. He lunged for the nearest weapon, a rusted wrench half buried under debris, just as a figure stepped into the doorway. A woman. She was tall, her dark hair pulled into a tight braid, her arms crossed over a grease-stained dockworker's jacket. Her eyes, sharp and wary, locked onto his. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Ethan didn't lower the wrench. "Who are you?" "Maria Reyes." She jerked her chin toward the hatch. "I work the docks. Saw you climb in." Her gaze flicked to the open metal box in his hand. "That's Henry Cole's stuff." "You knew my uncle?" Her jaw tightened. "Yeah, and if you're smart, you'll walk away right now." Ethan studied her. There was something guarded in her stance, a tension in her shoulders that had nothing to do with the cold. "Why?" Maria hesitated, then stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because men like your uncle don't just die out here. Not unless they find something they weren't supposed to." She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting someone. The sub's cursed. 3 divers vanished last year poking around it. The company called it accidents. But the old-timers know better. Ethan's grip on the wrench loosened slightly. "What did my uncle find?" Maria's lips pressed into a thin line. "Something worth killing for." A loud bang echoed from the hull above them, like something heavy had been dropped on the deck. Maria's head snapped up. "We need to go. Now." Ethan didn't argue. He shoved the key and photograph into his pocket and followed her toward the hatch. But as they climbed the ladder, a shadow moved across the porthole glass. A figure, fleeting, then gone. Someone was out there. Maria froze, her fingers tightening on the rungs. "Too late," she muttered. Then the sub's lights flickered on. Not the dim, dying glow of old bulbs, a harsh, blinding flood of light that seared through the darkness. Ethan shielded his eyes. What the hell? A voice crackled over the sub's ancient intercom, distorted but unmistakable. Welcome back, Mr. Cole. We've been waiting for you. The voice in the dark. The sudden burst of light burned Ethan's eyes. He stumbled back, nearly losing his footing on the ladder. Maria grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his sleeve. Move, she hissed. They scrambled up the remaining rungs as the intercom screeched with feedback. The voice returned, colder this time. You shouldn't have come back, Cole. Ethan's stomach twisted. Whoever was on that speaker knew his name, knew he was connected to his uncle, and they were here. Maria shoved the hatch open, and blinding daylight flooded in. Ethan squinted against the glare as they burst onto the deck. The wind howled, carrying the scent of salt and diesel. The dock was empty. No workers, no security, just the skeletal remains of abandoned ships creaking in the distance. But the feeling of being watched crawled over Ethan's skin like ants. Who the hell was that? He panted, gripping the rusted railing. Maria's gaze darted across the shipyard. We need to get off this sub. Now! A metallic groan echoed from below their feet. Then a deep, shuddering hum. The submarine's engine. It was starting up. Ethan's blood turned to ice. That's impossible. This thing hasn't moved in decades. Maria was already sprinting toward the gangplank. Ethan followed, his boots slipping on the wet metal. Behind them, the Neptune's shadow let out a shuddering vibration, like a beast waking from slumber. They hit the dock just as the first thick plume of black smoke billowed from the sub's exhaust. The gangplank shook, then collapsed into the water with a splash. Ethan spun to face the submarine. Through the haze of smoke, he caught a glimpse of a figure in the conning tower, a shadowy silhouette. There 1 second, gone the next. Did you see? Maria yanked him behind a stack of cargo crates. Shut up and stay down. The sub's engines roared louder, churning the water into froth, but it didn't pull away from the dock. Instead, the lights inside flickered wildly, and the intercom spat out one last garbled sentence. Find it before they do. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the engine died. The lights cut out. Silence fell over the dock, broken only by the distant cry of gulls. Ethan's hands were shaking. What the hell was that? Maria exhaled sharply. A warning. She stood, brushing rust from her jeans. And a pretty damn clear one. Ethan stared at the submarine, now still and dark again. None of this made sense. Ghostly voices? Engines starting on their own? His uncle's obsession with coordinates? He pulled the photograph from his pocket, the one with the red X near the Florida Keys. You said my uncle found something worth killing for. Was it this? Maria glanced at the photo, then stiffened. Where did you get that? In the sub, along with this. He held up the key. For the first time, something like fear flashed in Maria's eyes. She grabbed his wrist. Listen to me. If you value your life, you'll burn that photo and forget you ever saw it. Why? What's in the keys? She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Your uncle wasn't just some washed-up sailor. He was hunting the Leonov fortune. Ethan frowned. The what? A Soviet cargo ship that vanished in 1983. Rumor says it was carrying billions in gold, art, and diamonds. Payment for a failed arms deal. It went down somewhere near the Keys, but no one ever found it. She tapped the photo. Until your uncle, apparently. Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. Billions. Billions. Enough to change his life forever. Enough to make men kill. A loud clang echoed from the far end of the dock. Maria's head snapped toward the sound. 2 men in dark jackets were walking purposefully in their direction. One reached into his coat. Damn it! Maria grabbed Ethan's arm. We need to go. Now. Why? Who are they? She didn't answer. Just pulled him into a sprint behind a maze of shipping containers. Ethan risked a glance back. The men were running now, closing the distance. One shouted in a thick Russian accent. Stop them! Ethan's blood ran cold. Maria ducked behind a forklift, gasping. Their Bratva, Russian mob. They've been watching this doc for years, waiting for someone to lead them to that treasure. Ethan's mind reeled. The mob? A lost fortune? None of this felt real. And yet, the men chasing them were very, very real. Maria peeked around the forklift. There's a service gate at the end of this row. On 3, we run for it. Ready? Ethan nodded, gripping the keys so tightly it bit into his palm. 1, 2. A gunshot rang out. The bullet sparked off the forklift's metal frame, inches from Ethan's head. Maria didn't wait for 3. Go! They ran. Blood in the water. The gunshot still echoed in Ethan's ears as he sprinted behind Maria, his lungs burning. His boots pounded against the cracked asphalt of the shipyard, every muscle screaming. Another shot rang out, this one closer, kicking up concrete dust near his feet. Left! Maria barked, yanking him behind a towering stack of rusted shipping containers. Ethan pressed his back against the cold metal, gasping. His hands trembled. He'd never been shot at before. The reality of it, the sound, the way the air seemed to tear, left him lightheaded. Maria pulled a switchblade from her boot. You ever stabbed a man, Cole? What? No. Today might be your first. She peered around the container. They're splitting up. One's coming around the far side. Ethan's mouth went dry. We should call the police. Maria snorted. Bratva owns half the cops in this town. She pressed the knife into his hand. Stay behind me, and if you see a chance to run, take it. Before he could argue, she moved, silent as a shadow. Ethan gripped the knife, his palms slick with sweat. He'd never even been in a fistfight. Now he was holding a weapon, hiding from Russian mobsters, all because of some stupid key and a dead uncle's obsession. A boot scuffed gravel nearby. Ethan held his breath. The Russian appeared suddenly, tall, broad-shouldered, a pistol glinting in his hand. He didn't see Maria crouched behind a pallet until it was too late. She struck like a viper. One moment the man was standing. The next, Maria had hooked a leg behind his knees and slammed him to the ground. His gun skittered across the asphalt. They grappled, rolling, until Maria ended up on top, driving her elbow into his throat. The man gagged, his face purpling. Ethan, she snarled. He realized why a second too late. The second Russian stood 10 feet away, pistol raised. Ethan moved on instinct. He lunged, swinging the switchblade wildly. The blade didn't connect, but the Russian flinched, just enough for Maria to twist and kick out, sweeping his legs. The gun went off, the bullet ricocheting off the containers with a deafening ping. Maria scrambled for the fallen pistol. The first Russian grabbed her ankle. Ethan didn't think. He brought the knife down. The blade sank into the man's forearm with a sickening thunk. The Russian howled, releasing Maria. She snatched the gun and whirled, pressing the barrel to the second man's forehead as he tried to rise. "Niet," he gasped, eyes wide. Maria's finger tightened on the trigger. Ethan grabbed her wrist. No. For a heartbeat, he thought she might shoot anyway. Then she exhaled sharply and pistol-whipped the Russian across the temple instead. He crumpled. The first man clutched his bleeding arm, cursing in Russian. Maria aimed at his chest. "Who sent you?" The man spat at her feet. She cocked the hammer. "Maria." Ethan grabbed her arm again. "We need to go." Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had heard the gunshots. Maria hesitated, then swore and kicked the Russian in the ribs. "Run." They bolted for the chain-link fence at the yard's edge. Ethan's hands shook so badly he could barely grip the metal links as they climbed. He hit the ground on the other side and kept running, following Maria through back alleys and over dumpsters until the sirens faded behind them. They didn't stop until they reached a seedy motel 3 blocks away. Maria shoved Ethan into a first-floor room and locked the door behind them. Ethan collapsed against the wall, sliding to the floor. His breath came in ragged gasps. The switchblade was still clutched in his hand, the tip stained red. He'd stabbed someone. Maria tossed the stolen pistol onto the bed and rummaged through a duffel bag. "You're lucky you didn't get us killed back there." Ethan stared at her. "I'm lucky? You were about to execute that guy. And you were about to let him walk away so he could call his friends." She pulled a first aid kit from the bag. "Next time, don't hesitate." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, then noticed a dark stain spreading across Maria's sleeve. "You're hit." She peeled back the fabric, revealing a shallow graze along her bicep. "Just a scratch." Ethan took the first aid kit with unsteady hands. "Why are they after you?" Maria's jaw tightened as he dabbed antiseptic on the wound. "My brother was part of your uncle's crew. He disappeared 6 months ago, same time your uncle had a heart attack." She met Ethan's eyes. "I think the Bratva killed them both." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Over the Leonov treasure?" Maria nodded. "And now you have the key to finding it." She pointed to the photograph still crumpled in Ethan's pocket. "That's why they'll keep coming." Outside, a car door slammed. They both froze. Maria snatched the pistol and crept to the window, peering through the blinds. "Damn it!" Ethan's blood ran cold. "What?" She turned, face grim. "We got company." No safe harbor. The motel room's stale air clung to Ethan's throat as he pressed himself against the wall, listening to the heavy footsteps outside. Maria held the stolen pistol in a white-knuckled grip, her back flat against the peeling wallpaper beside the door. A fist pounded on the thin wood. "Open up. Police." Ethan's pulse spiked. Police? Had they actually called the authorities? Maria's lips curled into a silent snarl. She shook her head sharply and mouthed a single word. "Bratva." Of course. The Russian mob had cops in their pocket. This was a trap. The pounding came again, harder this time. Last chance. Ethan scanned the room for an exit. One window, covered by yellow curtains. A bathroom with a frosted glass pane too small to crawl through. They were cornered. Maria motioned toward the bathroom. As quietly as possible, they slipped inside. She locked the door just as the motel room's main door crashed open. Wood splintered. Boots stomped across the carpet. "Check the bathroom." A gruff voice ordered in heavily accented English. Ethan's breath hitched. The bathroom door had no lock strong enough to stop a determined kick. Maria's eyes darted to the small window above the toilet. She climbed onto the sink, testing the latch. Rusted shut. A shadow darkened the gap under the bathroom door. Maria pressed the pistol into Ethan's hand and unsheathed her knife again. Her message was clear. Get ready to fight. The doorknob rattled. Then, a deafening boom shook the entire motel. The bathroom mirrors shattered. Glass rained down as the walls trembled. For a stunned second, Ethan thought they'd been hit by a grenade. Then the screaming started. "What the hell was that?" one of the Russians shouted. Maria didn't hesitate. She smashed the butt of her knife against the window, cracking the frosted glass. Another kick sent it shattering outward. "Go!" Ethan didn't need telling twice. He scrambled onto the sink and squeezed the narrow frame, jagged glass tearing at his clothes. The drop to the alley below knocked the wind to his lungs. Maria landed beside him a second later, already running. Behind them, black smoke billowed from the motel's front. A car burned in the parking lot, flames licking at the sky. "Was that?" "Diversion," Maria panted. "Keep moving." They sprinted through a maze of back alleys, putting distance between themselves and the chaos. Ethan's ribs ached, his lungs burning. He still clutched the pistol, the metal slick against his palm. Maria finally slowed near a boarded-up laundromat, pressing a hand to her bleeding side where the glass had cut her. "We need wheels." Ethan leaned against the graffiti-covered wall, sucking in air. "Who blew up that car?" "Only one person crazy enough." Maria wiped sweat from her brow. "Lucas." "Who's Lucas?" "My brother's old Navy buddy. Been watching my back since." She trailed off, jaw tightening. "He's the one who warned me about the Bratva's interest in your uncle's sub." Ethan remembered the glint of something in the darkness of the Neptune's shadow. The shadowy figure on the dock. Had that been Lucas? A phone buzzed. Maria pulled a burner from her pocket and read the text. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Lucas is nearby. Says he's got a boat." "A boat?" "Only way we're getting to the Keys alive." She nodded toward the distant glint of water at the alley's end. "Bratva controls the airports. They'll be watching the highways." Ethan stared at her. "You're serious? We're just going to sail to Florida." Maria's smile was all teeth. Unless you've got a better idea. Rich boy. The key in Ethan's pocket seemed to grow heavier. The photograph, the coordinates, the fortune that had already gotten people killed. He thought of his empty apartment, the overdue bills, the way Rick Dawson laughed as he kicked at the floors Ethan had just mopped. "Fine," he said, "but we're splitting whatever we find 50-50. Maria snorted. "Deal, assuming we don't get shot first." A motorcycle roared to life somewhere nearby. Maria tensed, then exhaled as a familiar figure rounded the corner. A broad-shouldered man with a scar cutting through his stubble astride a battered Harley. "Lucas," Maria breathed. The man tossed her a helmet. "Vamonos, trouble. We've got company coming." Ethan didn't ask how he knew. The distant wail of more sirens said enough. As Lucas revved the engine, Ethan took one last look at the smoke rising over the city. His old life was burning behind him. Ahead lay open water, buried treasure, and a small army of killers on their trail. He climbed onto the bike. The hunt was on. The devil's current. The motorcycle's engine screamed beneath Ethan as they tore through the industrial district, the wind whipping tears from his eyes. Lucas drove like a man possessed, weaving between cargo trucks and chain-link fences with inches to spare. Maria's grip around Ethan's waist was the only thing keeping him from flying off. They skidded to a stop at a derelict fishing pier, the wood groaning under their weight. Lucas killed the engine, and in the sudden silence, the distant wail of police sirens was unmistakable. "Told you they'd come," Lucas muttered, swinging off the bike. He was taller up close, well over 6 feet, with a jagged scar that ran from his temple to his jawline. His eyes, a cold ocean gray, flicked to Ethan. "This the guy?" Maria nodded. "Ethan Cole, Henry's nephew." Lucas's mouth twisted. "Explains why the brat was crawling all over the damn city." He grabbed a duffel bag from the bike's saddlebag and tossed it to Maria. "Supplies. Boats at the end of the pier. We leave in 5. Ethan followed them down the rotting planks, his legs still shaky from the ride. The boat Lucas had promised was a weathered fishing trawler, its white paint peeling like sunburnt skin. The name Wanderlust was barely visible on the hull. "You're kidding," Ethan said. Lucas smirked. "She's ugly, but she's fast. And more importantly, she's not being watched." He jumped aboard and began untying the lines. Maria shoved the duffel into Ethan's arms. "Change of clothes. Food. Ammo. Ammo." The word sent a chill down his spine. Below deck, the cabin smelled of diesel and old fish. A narrow bunk, a galley barely big enough to turn around in, and a navigation station covered in yellowed maps. Lucas's home, apparently. Ethan unzipped the duffel. Alongside protein bars and a first aid kit were 3 pistols and boxes of ammunition. His stomach turned. Maria noticed his hesitation. "Ever fired a gun before?" "No." She loaded a magazine with practiced ease. "Today's your lucky day." The engine roared to life, vibrating through the hull. Ethan stumbled to the porthole as the pier shrank behind them. No police cars. No black sedans full of Russian mobsters. Just the open expanse of the Atlantic, glittering under the afternoon sun. For the first time since he'd stepped onto that cursed submarine, he breathed. Then Lucas's voice crackled over the intercom. "We've got company." Ethan bolted up the ladder to the deck. Lucas stood at the wheel. Binoculars pressed his eyes. Maria joined them, shading her gaze against the sun. A sleek black speedboat cut through the waves 2 miles back, gaining fast. "Bratva?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Lucas's grip on the wheel tightened. "They must have tracked us in the motel." He shoved the binoculars into Ethan's hands. "Look familiar?" Ethan adjusted the focus. The speedboat's cockpit came into sharp relief, and his blood turned to ice. The man at the wheel was the same one Maria had pistol-whipped at the shipyard. The bandage on his forehead was stark white against his tanned skin. And beside him, cradling a rifle, stood the Russian whose arm Ethan had stabbed. They'd come for revenge. Maria cursed. "How long until we lose them?" Lucas checked the radar. "Not fast enough." He jerked his chin toward a metal crate bolted to the deck. "Open that." Ethan pried it open. Inside lay a rusted rocket launcher. "You've got to be kidding me," he breathed. Lucas grinned. "Welcome to the party, rich boy." Maria snatched a weapon and began assembling it with terrifying efficiency. Lucas, evasive maneuvers. "Ethan, get below." "Like hell." Ethan grabbed a pistol from the duffel. It was heavier than he expected. The speedboat was close enough now that Ethan could see the Russians' snarling faces. The one with the rifle took aim. Crack! The bullet punched through the Wanderlust's mast, sending splinters flying. Ethan ducked, his heart hammering against his ribs. Maria didn't flinch. She hefted the rocket launcher onto her shoulder, eyes narrowed. Steady. The speedboat hit a wave and lurched. Maria fired. The rocket screamed across the water and missed. It detonated harmlessly in the speedboat's wake, sending up a geyser of foam. Damn it! Maria reloaded. The Russians were laughing now. The rifleman took aim again. Boom! An explosion rocked the speedboat, sending flames and debris spiraling into the sky. Ethan gaped as the hull split in two, the Russians vanishing in a fireball. What the... Lucas lowered a flare gun, smoke curling from the barrel. "Diversion," he said with a wink. Maria punched his arm. "You asshole, you had me waste our only rocket." Lucas just laughed and cranked the throttle. The Wanderlust surged forward, leaving the burning wreckage behind. Ethan sank onto the deck, his legs jelly. He'd almost died. Again, Lucas clapped him on the back. "Cheer up, kid." Next stop, the Keys. As the adrenaline faded, Ethan stared at the horizon. Somewhere out there was the Leonov Fortune, and between them and it, an ocean full of killers. Shadows in the shallows. 3 days at sea had turned Ethan's world into a never-ending cycle of salt spray, canned beans, and paranoia. Every creak of the Wanderlust's hull made him flinch. Every shadow on the horizon looked like another speedboat full of Bratva gunmen. But now, as the Florida Keys emerged from a morning haze, Ethan allowed himself a sliver of hope. Maria adjusted the binoculars, her knuckles white. "Coordinates put us right over the wreck site." Lucas cut the engine, letting the trawler drift in the gentle swell. The water here was absurdly clear. Ethan could see straight down to the coral reefs 30 feet below, their colors muted in the dawn light. No sign of a sunken Soviet cargo ship. "You sure this is a spot?" Lucas grunted, checking the GPS. Ethan pulled the photograph from his waterproof pouch. The red X marked the spot just west of Marathon Key. They were close. Had to be. Maria strapped a dive knife to her thigh. Only one way to know for sure. Lucas tossed her a wetsuit. "You're not going down alone." Ethan cleared his throat. "What about me?" They both turned. Lucas smirked. "You know how to scuba dive. Rich boy." "No, but I can swim." Maria sighed. "Stay on the boat. Watch for sharks? Russians? Both." Ethan crossed his arms. "I didn't come this far to babysit the cooler." A tense silence. Then Lucas chuckled and threw him a snorkel mask. "Try not to drown." The water swallowed Ethan whole, shockingly cold despite the tropical heat above. He kicked hard, following Maria and Lucas downward, the pressure building in his ears. Sunlight speared through the blue, illuminating schools of silver fish that scattered at their approach. Then he saw it. A dark shape loomed from the reef. A massive hull, split open like a gutted whale. The Leonov, or what remained of it. Barnacles encrusted the metal, and coral grew where rust hadn't eaten through. Maria swam toward the jagged tear in the ship's side, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. Ethan followed, his lungs burning. The wreck's interior was a labyrinth of collapsed corridors and dangling wires. Something glinted in the debris, a brass porthole, its glass long shattered. Lucas tapped his shoulder and pointed. A skeleton. Not just one. Dozens. They lay tangled in the wreckage, some still clutching rusted rifles. Soviet naval uniforms hung in tatters from their bones. Ethan recoiled, kicking up silt. This wasn't just a shipwreck. It was a mass grave. Maria swam deeper, unfazed. She paused as sealed door, its edges fused shut by decades of corrosion. Lucas examined it, then pulled a small explosive charge from his dive belt. Ethan's eyes widened. He shook his head violently. Are you insane? Lucas ignored him. The charge detonated with a muffled thump, the shockwave vibrating through Ethan's ribs. The door groaned open, silt swirling like fog. Inside lay the Leonov's cargo hold. And the gold, bars of it, stacked floor to ceiling, gleaming dully under their lights. Jewelry, artwork, even a tarnished Faberge egg, all preserved in this watery tomb. Ethan's pulse pounded. The fortune was real. Billions. Maria reached for the nearest gold bar. A shadow moved in the murk behind her. Ethan tried to scream. Only bubbles escaped. The diver emerged from the darkness like a nightmare. Black wetsuit, rebreather mask, a serrated knife in hand. Not Russian. Worse. Professional. Lucas spun just as two more divers appeared from the wreckage. Mercenaries. Maria barely dodged the first knife slash. The blade grazed her tank, sending a stream of bubbles erupting. Lucas drew his own knife, but the second diver tackled him into a pile of gold bars. Ethan flailed backward, crashing into a skeletal corpse. His hand closed around something cold and heavy, a rusted pistol, still clutched in the dead sailor's grip. The third diver turned toward him. Ethan did the only thing he could think of. He pulled the trigger. The gun didn't fire. Of course it didn't. 50 years underwater had turned it into a paperweight, but the click was enough to startle the diver. Maria seized a distraction. She drove her knife into the man's thigh, a cloud of blood blooming in the water. Lucas had but his attacker, then grabbed a gold bar and swung it like a club. The impact sent the diver spinning into the shadows. Ethan kicked for the surface, his lungs on fire. He burst into the sunlight, gasping, and froze. The Wanderlust was gone. In its place floated a sleek white yacht, its deck crawling with armed men. A familiar voice called out, "Ethan Cole, so nice of you to lead us right to the treasure." Standing at the yacht's rail, sipping a martini, was Rick Dawson, Ethan's old boss from the Maritime Museum. And beside him, smiling coldly, was a lawyer who delivered the submarine's inheritance papers. Ethan's blood turned to ice. This had never been about the Russians. The collector's gambit. The yacht's deck swayed beneath Ethan's bare feet as two armed men dragged him aboard, seawater dripping from his clothes. Rick Dawson smirked down at him, his usual museum security, uniform replaced by tailored linen, and a gold Rolex that probably cost more than Ethan made in a year. Well, Rick said, swirling his martini. The janitor finally cleans up. Ethan spat salt water onto the teak deck. "You set me up." "Of course I did." Rick nodded to the lawyer. Price, Ethan remembered, who stood scanning a tablet displaying sonar images of the wreck below. Henry Cole was my uncle, too. Distant, but blood. When the old fool finally croaked, I knew his lunatic treasure hunt would lure the last living Cole air right to the Leonov fortune. He chuckled. All I had to do was dangle that rusty submarine like bait. Ethan's stomach twisted. The inheritance, the key, all of it. A trap, a splash drew his attention. Maria and Lucas surfaced, guns trained on them from the yacht's deck. Lucas had a bloody gash across his forehead. Maria's jaw was set like stone. Rick sighed. "Ah, the cavalry. Maria Reyes, right? I heard you've been poking around where you shouldn't." He turned to Lucas. "And the disgraced Navy SEAL. Charming." Lucas bared his teeth. "Go to hell. Already there, mate." Rick gestured to a crewman, who hauled up a dripping net full of gold bars. "Thanks for doing the heavy lifting." Ethan's mind raced. Below deck, he could hear more gold being hauled aboard. They'd been played from the start. But why let them live this long? Price answered the unspoken question. "We did need your biometrics, Mr. Cole." He held up a small scanner, glowing with a green light. Henry's final lockbox requires a living relative's retinal scan. And now that we have it... A crewman rushed up from below. "Sir, the Russians are inbound, 5 minutes out." Rick's smirk vanished. "Damn, Bratva." He turned to his men. "Prep the charges. We're blowing the wreck." Maria lunged. A rifle butt to the ribs dropped her to her knees. Ethan saw his chance. He grabbed the nearest gold bar from the net and swung with all his strength. The impact sent Rick sprawling, his martini glass shattering. Price reached for a pistol. Lucas was faster. He snatched a gun from Price's belt and fired twice. 2 crewmen dropped. Chaos erupted as the remaining guards scrambled for cover. Ethan! Maria tossed him a knife snatched from a fallen guard. The blade felt right in his hand now. Rick wiped blood from his split lip, eyes blazing. You have no idea who you're stealing from. Ethan advanced. I'm not stealing. I'm taking back what's mine. A speedboat roared into view, black hull, armed men. The Bratva had arrived. Gunfire erupted as the Russians boarded the yacht from the opposite side. Ethan ducked behind a lifeboat as bullets tore through the deck. Maria dragged him down beside Lucas near the yacht's stern. We need to move now. Lucas nodded toward a wave runner tethered to the side. 1 shot. Go! They ran as the firefight raged. Lucas covered their retreat, picking off Bratva thugs with chilling precision. Ethan and Maria leapt onto a wave runner just as a grenade exploded amidships. The blast sent the yacht lurching. Ethan caught a final glimpse of Rick Dawson screaming orders as flames engulfed the deck. Then they were skimming across the waves, bullets whizzing past. Maria whooped, her hair whipping in the wind. Where now, genius? Ethan grinned, adrenaline surging. He patted the waterproof pouch at his waist, the one holding Henry's original map. The real treasure, he shouted over the engine's roar. Because the gold in the wreck? That was just a decoy. The devil's coordinates. The Wave Runner's engine coughed its last breath 2 miles off Big Pine Key, leaving Ethan, Maria, and Lucas bobbing in the swells as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Behind them, black smoke coiled into the sky where Rick's yacht still burned. Lucas checked the Wave Runner's fuel gauge and cursed. We're sitting ducks out here. Maria peeled back the waterproof pouch at Ethan's waist. All right, treasure boy, where's this real fortune you mentioned? Ethan unrolled his uncle's map, the paper brittle from salt water. In the fading light, he traced a second set of coordinates Henry had scribbled in nearly invisible ink. 20 miles northeast, near an uninhabited atoll called Dead Man's Cay. Clever bastard, Lucas muttered. Bury the decoy where everyone would look. Hide the real score somewhere nobody bothers. A distant engine hummed across the water. Maria stiffened. Company. Ethan squinted at the approaching lights, not the Bratva speedboats, but a Coast Guard cutter. His pulse jumped. Salvation or another trap. Lucas grabbed the map and stuffed it in his pocket. We lie low and wait. He rolled off the Wave Runner into the dark water. What are you? Maria yanked Ethan under just as searchlights swept their position. The cutter slowed, circling. Ethan's lungs burned as he clung to the Wave Runner's underside, the hull's metal scraping his knuckles. Above, radio static crackled. Reports of gunfire checked for survivors. The cutter idled for an eternity before the engines revved again, moving toward the smoke plume. Ethan surfaced, gasping. Maria spat seawater. We need a boat. Now! Lucas swam to the Wave Runner and wrenched open a panel. Give me your knife. Ethan handed over the blade. Lucas jammed it into the electronics, sparks flying. Within seconds, he'd hot-wired the dead engine back to life. Maria raised an eyebrow. Navy SEALs learned that. Lucas's smile didn't reach his eyes. Not exactly. Dead Man's Cay at midnight was a postcard of nightmares. Mangroves twisted like skeletal fingers. Water so still it reflected the stars like broken glass. They anchored the Wave Runner in a hidden cove and waded ashore, weapons drawn. The map led them inland to a depression in the sand, barely visible under creeping vines. Lucas dug with his hands until his fingers hit metal, a rusted hatch, nearly buried. Maria helped pry it open. The stench of mildew and old gunpowder wafted from the darkness below. Ethan aimed his flashlight down the ladder. The beam illuminated a concrete bunker, its walls lined with Soviet naval insignia. And in the center, the real Leonov fortune. Not just gold. Weapons. Crates stamped with Cyrillic lettering stretched into the shadows. AK-47s. Grenades. And at least a dozen rectangular objects covered in tarps. Missile launchers? Maria whistled. Henry wasn't hunting treasure. He found a Cold War arms cache. Lucas pulled back a tarp, revealing stacks of binders. He flipped one open. Project Midnight. This isn't just old Soviet junk. It's active Black Ops tech. Experimental sonar. Stealth coatings. Things that don't exist on paper. Ethan's skin prickled. That's why they killed him. A noise echoed from the tunnel behind them. Boots on concrete. Rick Dawson stepped into the light, his once pristine clothes torn and soot-stained. A pistol gleamed in his hand. Behind him, 2 Bratva enforcers' level rifles. "Knew you'd lead me here eventually," Rick said. He nodded to the crates. "You think this is about money? The Midnight tech is worth trillions to the right buyers." Maria edged toward a crate marked with explosive warnings. "You'll never smuggle this out." Rick's smile turned feral. "Who said anything about smuggling?" He raised a detonator. "The buyer's coming to us." The bunker's lights flickered to life with a hum. Outside, the roar of heavy rotors shook the ground. Ethan looked up through the hatch and saw the silhouette of a black helicopter descending like a vulture, and painted on its side a symbol that turned his blood to ice. A serpent coiled around a sword, the same symbol stamped on the crates. Midnight's End. The black helicopter's searchlight speared to the bunker's hatch, painting them all in stark white. Ethan shielded his eyes as the rotor wash kicked up swirling dust from the concrete floor. The serpent and sword symbol gleamed on the pilot's door as the aircraft hovered like a predator sizing up its meal. Rick Dawson backed toward the ladder, the detonator tight in his grip. "You 3 just became very expendable." Maria didn't blink. She kept her hands loose at her sides, inches from the grenade she'd palmed from a nearby crate. "You push that button, you die too." Lucas edged left, putting himself between Ethan and the Bratva gunman. His voice dropped to a whisper only Ethan could hear. "When I move, grab the small black case from crate 7. Don't drop it." Ethan barely nodded. His mouth tasted like copper and fear. The helicopter touched down outside, its engine whine fading. Boots crunched on sand, lots of boots. Rick grinned. "Meet your new owners." The first figure to descend the ladder wore a tailored suit that cost more than the Portland Maritime Museum's annual budget. His salt and pepper beard was trimmed with military precision, and the pistol at his hip had a mother-of-pearl grip. Ethan recognized him instantly. Vincent Cross. The name tore from Lucas's throat like a curse. Maria stiffened. "The Vincent Cross?" Black market arms kingpin. The man smiled, adjusting his cufflinks. "Former kingpin, Ms. Reyes. These days, I'm more of a facilitator for private military interests." His gaze slid to the crates. "Project Midnight was our operation before the Soviets stole it. We're just reclaiming lost property." Ethan's mind raced. None of this was about treasure. It was about weapons. Weapons powerful enough to start wars. Cross nodded to Rick. "You've done well." Rick bowed his head. "Just honor our deal." "Of course." Cross drew his pistol and shot Rick between the eyes. The gunshot echoed like thunder in the bunker. Rick collapsed, the detonator rolling from his lifeless fingers. The Bratva men froze, then slowly lowered their weapons. Cross holstered his gun. "I hate middlemen." Lucas moved. He lunged for the nearest crate, yanking open a black case the size of a laptop. Inside, a device hummed to life, a portable EMP emitter, military grade. "Down!" Lucas slammed the switch. A pulse of blue energy exploded outward. Every light in the bunker blew out in a shower of sparks. The helicopter's engines died with a metallic shriek outside. Cross's men screamed as their night vision goggles fried. Ethan hit the floor as Maria pulled the pin on her grenade and lobbed it up the hatch. The explosion shook the bunker. "Go, go, go." Lucas shoved Ethan toward a side tunnel Ethan hadn't noticed. A narrow escape shaft, probably Henry's contingency plan. They crawled through pitch blackness, the sounds of shouting and gunfire fading behind them. 20 yards later, they burst out onto moonlit sand. The helicopter burned nearby. Its rotors snapped like twigs. Cross's men staggered blindly in the smoke. Maria grabbed Ethan's arm. "The wave runner." They sprinted for the cove. Behind them, Cross emerged from a bunker, his suit smoldering. He raised his pistol. Lucas spun and fired 3 rounds. Cross went down, clutching his shoulder. The Wave Runner's engine roared to life. They skimmed across the waves as the first police boats rounded the quay, sirens wailing. 1 week later, the FBI interrogation room smelled like stale coffee and regret. Agent Torres, a weary man with 5 o'clock shadow, slid a photo across the table. The smoldering ruins of Dead Man's Cay. Quite the mess you left, Mr. Cole. Ethan sipped his awful vending machine coffee. We saved you $1 billion in black market weapons. Where's our thank you? Torres snorted. Vincent Cross is singing like a canary to avoid death row. Turns out Project Midnight was just the tip of the iceberg. He leaned in. But here's the funny part. We never found the gold. Ethan kept his face blank. Maria had dumped the real Leonov gold bars, the ones Henry had secretly moved years ago, into a secure locker in Miami before the feds picked them up. $5 million each, tax-free. Lucas vanished into the wind with a single black case from crate 7. Torres stood. Stay out of trouble, Cole. Ethan walked out into the sunlight, where Maria leaned against a cherry-red Mustang convertible. Took you long enough, she said, tossing the keys. He caught them, grinning. Where to? Maria slid her sunglasses on. Somewhere they don't ask questions. The engine roared to life. Somewhere, beneath the waves, a rusted submarine kept its last secret. And Ethan Cole? He never mopped another floor again. Want more high-stakes adventures? Smash that like button. Subscribe for the next epic tale. And comment what treasure hunt we should feature next.